And a good Monday to you, Central Georgia. Thanks for tuning in here for a look at your extended forecast. Pretty quiet weekend of some weather, but we did have some notes surrounding yesterday's weather in the form of increased cloud cover, some pretty breezy conditions, and that all came courtesy of the passing of a frontal boundary. And we definitely felt the cooler and the drier air that filtered in behind that frontal boundary so far this morning. But now we are heading into another sunny afternoon, where we are going to see little to nothing in the way of cloud cover. So we will continue the temperature increase each and every afternoon as we go throughout the first half of the work week. But then once we get into the weekend, we do have a couple more talking points weather-wise. So we'll cover everything that you need to know. And yes, we finally do have some rain chances for a change to actually break down. So we'll go over what we're expecting with that, kind of the setup that we are expecting and why there's still a good deal of uncertainty, especially regarding the coverage of those rain chances as of right now. So let's see if we'll get the graphic to advance right over there. There we go. Just had to switch over from the other Max system right there on my clicker. So April, been a very dry month. Obviously, we were off to a very wet start with 3 out of the first 5 days recording something in the way of rainfall. Put us at the top of the near normal category. But the last day we recorded rain, Easter Sunday. So it has been a steady decline for just about 2 weeks now in terms of not receiving any rainfall. That puts us down in the very dry box, which we did cross over into over the last 3 days or so. But the total for the month of April at 1 inch. So all we're really going to need is maybe a substantial rainmaker or two to come through over Middle Georgia Regional Airport, and it should put us around average for this month, as typically April is one of the drier months on the calendar year as opposed to the wetter ones, even despite the saying April showers do bring May flowers. But at this rate, there's not looking to be really anything in the way of May flowers. We are well below average, and this is just continuing the month-by-month drought that we have continued to see, which not only dates back to the beginning of this year, but it also dates back into the end of last year. But for 2026 as a whole, 6 and about 1/4 of an inch below average for where we should be this time of year. So there's a look at how much below average we have been month by month. Nearly 2 inches below average for the month, or monthly rainfall for the month of January, just over 2 inches below average in March, and right now we are about 1.5 inches below where we should be at this point in the month of April. And once again, February, we were the closest that we have been to average, and I think we had 1 day of some rainfall that didn't get necessarily taken into account, but we're only talking about a 1/2 inch of rainfall. Overall, it is definitely not even enough to put a significant dent. If we were to have recorded that 1/2 inch of rainfall in the month of February, it would have just maybe put our numbers back closer to average, maybe the only month that we have seen over the past 8 that has been pretty close to average for the totals. So all this data is taken as of April 19th. And again, this is based on your 30-year normals, which means that this data is going to go back into the early 1990s. So it's not taking in all of the data all time, but it's more of a recent scale, and that is going to give you an idea about where our averages do stand as the more recent years as opposed to all time. But your drought monitor got a release as of last Thursday. Saw a couple of changes, but nothing too drastic, very thankfully. I think the biggest change was this area of an exceptional drought, which stretches well down into South Georgia. That expanded across our southeastern counties because they got little to nothing in the way of rainfall in that beginning stretch of April, where we did see some pretty substantial totals across a good amount of central Georgia, even some spots of Taylor County that actually recorded around 5 inches of rain, but it still wasn't enough to get them out of the extreme drought. And we continue to see that those are 2 shades. I would say the orange and the red are going to be the most popular in central Georgia. However, this darker red shade, kind of the marooner color, that is going to be the worst of the worst that you can get as far as drought conditions. And all this data, it's taken as of April 14th, which is last Tuesday, and we haven't recorded an inch or even anything in the way of a trace of rainfall since that date. So of course, these drought conditions are unfortunately looking to get worse as we get the update with the drought monitor later on this week. So a cooler start to the week on the temperature side of things. Like we were talking about, that front came through yesterday, ushered in a cooler and a drier air mass. So the drier air mass is going to continue with the quiet stretch of weather until we can get some humidity back in the forecast. But we are going to see some warmer temperatures each and every day as we go afternoon by afternoon throughout the midweek and all the way into the end of the work week. Finally, some rain chances are ahead. So like I was talking about, we need an increase in the humidity content. we are looking to actually have that as we head into the weekend ahead. So let's break down everything that you need to know. Starting out with a walk around the quad. Not a single cloud that is within view, maybe a few over here that are some very thin upper level clouds over to the west of us that we can get a glimpse of off Cohen Walker Drive. Nonetheless, it is a bit of a breezy afternoon, and it is finally settling in to be a much warmer afternoon. 66 degrees, the current number down in Perry by the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Easterly winds around 9 miles per hour. Downtown Dublin, nothing but blue skies. Same thing over downtown Macon. And then probably a pretty similar temperature that we do see just a little bit to the north of Perry up in Warner Robins in northern Houston County. So here's a look at your current temperatures across the United States. Bit of a cooler environment than we have seen, especially dating back to the end of last week, where we did see widespread 70s and some numbers that were already flirting with the 80s. Well, the very tip of the peninsula down there in Florida, you can actually see some flashes of some red color. Imagine that's probably indicating some 80s, maybe even some 90s already down in southern areas like Miami, getting down to Palm Beach and such. But here across the eastern United States, we can see that it's a chilly environment up to the north and the northeast. And then as we go into really just the eastern part of the southern United States, it's a good mix of 50s and 60s, but mainly in the 60s, where the number in Macon, pretty reminiscent of all of our neighbors down here in the southeast corner. So 66 in Macon, same number in Vidalia, Albany, down in Dothan, 65, just a little bit cooler up to the north and the northeast. We can see that the mountains have a little bit of flashes of some light blue, but 64 up in Greenville, 60 in Rome. And at the warmest, we spot 270s all the way down in Brunswick and down into Jacksonville. Some of those areas that did see that cooler and drier air mass filter in a little bit behind other areas farther up to the northeast, or excuse me, up to the northwest, the direction that our frontal boundary did come in from. Temperature-wise, we can continue to see that it's a mix of the mid-60s, maybe even the upper 60s across some areas where you see a 67 in Wrightsville, Warner Robins, 67 all the way up in Sparta. 68 actually looks to be the warmest number, and that's all the way down in McRae, which, funny enough, McRae was one of the cooler areas as of this morning, seeing nearly a 30-degree temperature increase. We saw McRae pop down to 38 degrees this morning, so we are definitely getting rid of whatever chill that we do have left in the air. So it's a bit of a half and half forecast right now as far as your winds and your wind gusts go. Northern central Georgia, we obviously still have a recorded gust up to 13 miles per hour, but it doesn't look like the breeze is as widespread up to the north. It is mainly coming out of the east and the northeast. Farther down to the south where you see the widespread blue, and you start to see some of that blue transition into a yellow color, which indicates even gustier winds than that blue shade. That's going to correlate to what we do see in the way of fire weather concerns later on this afternoon. So gustier winds are present farther to the south of us, but still the occasional gusts already up to 17 miles per hour in Cochrane down to Vidalia. Steady winds anywhere from about 5 to 6 miles per hour at the slowest to 12 to 13 miles per hour. That is going to be the breeziest conditions that we continue to see. Humidity levels, there is no shade of light green whatsoever. It is a very dry environment after that front has passed through, dropping your dew point temperatures down into the upper 20s and the low and mid 30s. So yes, we have to get dew point temperatures somewhere around 50 to start to welcome in that light blue, or not blue, excuse me, the light green shade on this graphic, just to indicate that there's a little bit of moisture in the forecast, but there is none whatsoever. It is going to be a very dry environment for the next couple of days, which will continue to create a satellite and radar image like this. Crystal clear, nothing worth talking about in the way of cloud cover or anything in the way of rain chances. We take a bigger picture view. Remember those clouds we were talking about that we could get a glimpse of that were way off in the distance in Warner Robins? That looks like it's going to be farther along the Gulf Coast, and that actually may be attributed to some fog in those more humid areas down there along Mobile, getting into southern Mississippi and the panhandle of Florida. So a quiet picture in the southeast nonetheless. Let's talk some numbers, because that's all we have to talk about, of course, once we go through a quiet weather stretch. 41 degrees. That was definitely not the low temperature as of yesterday morning. That was actually the temperature that we hit just before the midnight hour last night. So we did see that cooler air filter in throughout the day, and the combination of that cooler air moving in behind the front and the increase in cloud cover kept the numbers a good deal below average. 70 degrees which is 9 degrees below your average high of 79 degrees this time of year. And your morning low temperature was definitely above 52 degrees as you walked outside yesterday morning, but that temperature that was the lowest that we recorded yesterday just before midnight of 41 degrees, that does fall about 11 degrees below average. But of course, that was not the time that we did typically hit that lowest temperature during the day. Now, of course, as we get the almanac data in for today, I imagine that the lowest temperature going to be recorded somewhere down in the 30s, not too far off that value, but giving you an idea that the overnight time period from last night into this morning was a whole lot cooler than what we saw Saturday into your Sunday morning. There's a look at your records. Didn't really come close to either of them. In fact, it's probably the first time in a while that we were closer to the record low temperature as opposed to the record high temperature of 91 degrees. But no rain that was recorded, even with anything in the way of a light sprinkle shower that some select few lucky areas might have seen. So your departure, like we were just talking about, around 6¼ of an inch below where we should be at this point of the year. But yesterday was an important date because you can see sunrise time, 7 a.m. Well, that is going to be the last time that the sun is going to rise at the 7 a.m. hour or even later for quite some time, which we'll get to in just a moment. But sunset time, 8:08 p.m. So yesterday was the 19th, and that is going to mark our last 7 a.m. sunset that we have for a while. In fact, all the way until August 18th, that's when the sunrise is actually going to go all the way back to the 7 a.m. hour. But we are going to continue to see that light creeping in through the blinds a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier each and every day until we get into June, the end of June. And then that sunrise will begin to get a little bit later and a little bit later. But right now it is still going to continue to get earlier and earlier. So go ahead and prepare yourself to maybe be awoken a little bit before that alarm clock does go off over the next couple of days as you start to see some light creeping through the blinds a little bit earlier than you're used to. April high temperatures, finally a below average day yesterday, a blue box that we have not seen in about 10 days time. So 74 degrees on April 9th. That was the last time that we did have a below average high temperature. But your above average temperatures, that has been the name of the game for quite a while. 9 days in a row, I believe, if I'm counting these boxes correctly, of temperatures that have been not only above average, but mainly in the 80s. With the peak of the roller coaster coming last Friday. Last Friday was not only the warmest day of 2026 so far, but it was also the first time that we hit the 90-degree mark in 2026, which we would be correct in saying that, yes, it is a little bit premature because on average, we typically see the first 90-degree mark a couple days into the month of May. This is going to be May 5th, so we're still about two weeks out of that date as of right now, but when we hit that 90-degree mark last week, that was about 2.5 weeks premature for seeing that 90-degree mark. The earliest we've ever done it, imagine March 10th having a high temperature of 90 degrees, really right after you cross out of February. That was an immediate start to not only spring, but also a bit of an early preview of the summertime once we did hit that 90-degree mark back on March 10th, and the latest we've ever done it was back on June 29th. So obviously that is definitely getting into the actual beginning of the summer season, but way past that average first date at the beginning of May. So here's a look at your hour-by-hour warm-up for the rest of the day. Not going to see too much more of a warm-up. We're sitting somewhere in the mid to the upper 60s right now, and we'll cross over into the 70s just past lunchtime, and eventually starting to peak somewhere around 75, maybe 76 degrees. I think we'll climb up into the upper 70s today. 77 degrees for a high temperature, pretty close to your average high of 79 degrees, a whole lot closer than what we hit yesterday with a high temperature of 70. But I think your numbers today are going to be below average. Tomorrow going to be a little bit closer to average. And then as we go into Wednesday, sensing a little bit of a theme right here, we are going to see the numbers get back above average. So definitely something to look forward to, and obviously starting to feel those warmer temperatures, the more pleasant atmosphere after the pretty chilly morning, but not to say that the next couple of mornings aren't going to be on the chilly side of things. We'll talk a little bit more in depth about that coming up. But a northerly breeze around 5 to 10 miles per hour. Yes, some of those occasional gusts right now are getting up above 15 miles per hour, but I do expect that breeze to continue to subside. So I did want to flash it back to this graphic, which we talk a lot about each and every month at the beginning of the month to see what's going to change over the course of, say, the beginning of April all the way into the end of April. So a quick reminder of where we started out the month with average high temperature of 74 degrees and your average morning low temperature 48 degrees. So we did have our fair share of values that were actually below even this average. That was a little bit lower than it is as of right now. But as we go throughout about the next week and a half, so about the last 10 months of the month of April, we are going to see the average high temperature climb 3 more degrees, and along with that average low temperature, that will also climb another 3 degrees into the mid-50s as we go into that very last day of the month. And there's a look at what your sunrise and sunset time will be on that last day of April, 6:48 a.m. Remember, we just had our last 7 a.m. sunrise for quite some time until we get into the month of August. And then your sunset is just going to continue to get later and later and later until we get into the month of June as well. 8:15 p.m. is going to be when the sun does set as we go into that last day of April. So now let's talk about future view. Very briefly, we don't really need to spend too much time on it. It is a very uneventful stretch of weather once again. Going through the rest of today, nothing but sunshine for the majority of your Tuesday. Until finally we get closer into the afternoon and evening time frame. We'll start to see a few upper level clouds that build into the forecast. And I do anticipate our fair share of these clouds to stick around for the morning hours on Wednesday. But I think there'll be plenty of gaps, especially over to the east, to where we'll see some beautiful sunlight trying to break through some of that cloud cover. So it's going to be kind of a half and half forecast as we walk out the door. Maybe a bit on the gloomier side throughout at least your morning commute on Wednesday. And now this model run is popping up something that I have not seen as of recent model runs. So it is popping up a few showers. I wouldn't even doubt maybe a rumble of thunder or two, according to some of the darker colors that I did see flashes of. I'm not really putting too much stock into this. This is just what the newest model run does say. If we continue to see consistency, that there will be pop-up rain chances as we go into Wednesday. Then, of course, I might throw a 10 or a 20% chance of rain on the 7-day forecast, but it's not looking like a very widespread rain chance whatsoever, even if this is to occur. But I still think that the drier air is going to dominate our forecast as we go into the midweek. So I'm not putting too much stock into the idea of some pop-up showers, maybe even a rumble of thunder or two into the afternoon. But that remains to be seen. There will at least be more cloud cover in the forecast on Wednesday as opposed to Monday and Tuesday. So we'll continue to keep you updated if a pop-up rain chance is going to be something that could pertain to maybe the evening commute home from work and, of course, home from school. So the next 3 days, I still don't have anything in the way of rain chances. We will continue the dry spell of weather. But along with that, each day getting warmer. So each day that we go out into the future, it's going to be warmer than the previous one for the next few days. 77 turns into 79 tomorrow, and then 83 degrees for a high temperature on Wednesday, making the jump back above average and the jump back into the 80s by the time we roll into the halfway point of the work week. 48 for a morning low on Wednesday after we climb into the mid-40s tomorrow. I anticipate some values to be a little bit below these numbers, most values to probably be a little bit above these numbers, but I do try to go with a bit of a middle ground morning low temperature, and I have dropped the numbers down just because we have been typically going a little bit below what has been in the forecast model-wise. I think 43 was what a lot of models were calling for as of last night for the morning low temperatures as of today, and we saw our fair share of some upper 30s, even as low as 36 degrees down in Eastman this morning. But like I mentioned, the dry spell of weather, that will be one ingredient that continues to lead to these fire weather concerns each and every day. Low humidity and at least a light breeze that can already contribute to at least a fire danger statement, which we have in place for all of central Georgia until 8 p.m. later on this evening. And don't be surprised if you start to see one of these for Tuesday, for Wednesday, for Thursday, all the way into the weekend until we can finally get some more humidity back in the forecast. But it's not as bad as what we saw yesterday, which was the red flag warning. And we do see the red flag warning down to the south. Remember when we were looking at the winds and the wind gust graphic, there were gustier winds farther down to the south. And that was prompted a little bit of an increase and a little more weight to the decision of a red flag warning. That's going to be a step above a fire danger statement, which I've been saying red flag warnings, you need to treat them as essentially burn bans for the day. That means do not burn. Fire danger statement, I would still avoid burning if you absolutely can, but if you absolutely can't avoid doing some burning, today's your only opportunity to do so. Make sure you are doing it with extreme caution. So this is going to be valid for today until we get into the 8 p.m. hour. And then once again, we'll revisit this graphic tomorrow where I do anticipate at least another fire danger statement for some of central Georgia. But today it does exist for all of central Georgia, where the gustier winds are going to be present to the north of us and farther down to the south of us. So the humidity day by day, like I said, we're not really going to see an increase in moisture by the time we roll into Wednesday. So that's why I'm not forecasting anything in the way of this pop-up rain chances. I think it might have been one of those rogue model runs that sometimes it'll over-anticipate some of the rain chances that we do have. And by the next model run, it very well could already be out the window. But as we head into the end of the work week, that's when we finally start to see an upward direction to some of those dew point temperatures, where we are going to see them increase as we go into Saturday and Sunday. And that increase, it doesn't seem very significant. I mean, we're only hovering in the comfortable box. We would love some dew point temperatures in the 60s or even the 70s. I'm sure even a swampy atmosphere is what a lot of you will take in terms of a trade-off, because it's been so dry lately. We desperately need some rain. So we'll talk about what implications that has as we go into your weekend forecast. But first things first, I wanted to go ahead and get ahead of this, because if you are searching for any plans maybe throughout the afternoons and the evenings, might I suggest taking a trip up I-75 to go to Truist Park, not for a Braves game, but for some clean old-fashioned hate tomorrow evening. The number 5 Georgia Bulldogs are taking on the number 3 Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, 2 top 5 baseball teams in the country, squaring off at Truist Park for one game tomorrow for all of the marbles. Not going to be a series like it typically isn't, which I think is a crime, but that's a story for a different time. But one game, it is going to be immaculate weather up there at Truist Park if you do want to watch the Dogs and the Jackets square off. A splendid evening where temperatures will start out somewhere in the upper 70s if you are planning on getting there a little bit early, maybe doing some tailgating, hanging out in the Battery. But then as you get into first pitch and then as you progress into the evening, the numbers will get a little bit cooler, but it is still going to be very pleasant. And the sunset tomorrow evening is going to be around 8:13 p.m. So something that is definitely going to be highly watched all around the country, all around the baseball community, and especially here in the state of Georgia, just for simply some bragging rights, of course. So afternoon highs back here at home in central Georgia. We continue to see them stair step up. Upper 70s, near average tomorrow, into the 80s on Wednesday, and then 86 looks to be where we peak on Thursday and Friday, which is definitely still pretty warm. However, compared to what we just went through at the end of last week, 86 doesn't really feel all too warm. We're talking 91 last Friday for a recorded high temperature. And even some of those temperatures around 88 and 89, I was definitely feeling the warmth, even out there on the golf course. When you don't have a breeze present, these numbers are going to feel pretty warm, but hopefully this helps kind of ease us into the summertime. The earlier and earlier we start to get these warmer temperatures, I feel like the more bearable that the summertime season does feel. And we are pairing it up with little to no humidity until we start to get into the weekend, where we are going to get an increase in that moisture content. As far as the chilly start to this morning, we will still hold on to that feeling, but maybe not to the degree that we were talking about as of this morning. Morning low is what I had 40 degrees earlier today. Like I mentioned, we had some areas get down into the upper 30s. I wouldn't doubt that we have an area or two like Dublin or Eastman pop down into the upper 30s as of tomorrow morning. However, I am expecting a gradual increase. I think the increase is going to be more from today into tomorrow morning as opposed to the increase throughout the midweek. But as long as we continue to keep these numbers below average, it is going to feel just a little bit chilly, but each day will feel just a little bit more bearable than the previous. And then 52, finally getting back to average of 52 degrees as we get into Friday. But I do anticipate that average low to probably increase already to 53 degrees. Like I mentioned, we have 10 days to go and we have 3 more degrees of an increase to see with those average low temperatures along with your average high temperatures. So going into Thursday, we'll see a few clouds that are out and about. Same story for your Friday, not seeing anything in the way of rain chances here in central Georgia, but over to the west and up to the northwest of us, it's a bit of an active picture, and that is going to be a frontal boundary that's beginning to push down here into the southeast. But this frontal boundary, unfortunately, is not going to have the clean sweeping motion through the state of Georgia, but it may not necessarily be all that bad of a thing, because as this frontal boundary pushes closer and closer to us, what it's looking to do is park itself up to the north, and it does look to remain stationary. What that would do is, number one, create an axis of rain farther up to the north of us. So obviously we would love for that front to stall out directly over us here in central Georgia to continue to lead to pop-up rain chances along that boundary each and every day. However, it would lock us in a sector of not only some warmer air, but also some more humid air. And I think that could be just the right environment for maybe some smaller scale systems to move through, not necessarily very widespread like a front. But the rain chances will be back in the forecast starting on Saturday. Very low rain chances as of right now, because you can see that these long-range models, they're not really agreeing on one set solution. They are agreeing that it is going to be a suitable atmosphere down here in the southeast for something in the way of rain, but exactly what form that rain does take, still a little bit up in the air, but more so the coverage of that rain is the main question mark right now. Because the GFS right here is picking up on one of those smaller scale systems, which you'll hear us referring to as an MCS, which is basically going to be a frontal boundary that is not going to be as widespread, number one, but it's also going to be more so interacting with upper levels of the atmosphere. But that does look to maybe possibly come in as we go into Sunday. You are seeing some of those flashes of yellow, maybe some orange, which can indicate some heavier rainfall rates as well. So that would be associated with possibly some rumbles of thunder as well. That is going to be a welcome change. We obviously don't like to have severe weather all too frequently, but it has been forever without having anything in the way of rain chances. So we're just going to take anything that we can get that could be in the cards for us as we go all the way into the beginning of next week. Still seeing our fair share of widespread cloud cover and some splotchy areas of some green, but better rain chances once again up to the north and the northwest where that frontal boundary is stalling. But in terms of how much rain we could be expecting, the European model not hinting at too much right here, but again, the European was the blue shades that you did see on that last graphic, and it wasn't holding together maybe with that small scale system that could come through. The GFS was the one that was picking up on that, and that would send us maybe some totals that could get closer up to an inch. That's what more so starting to get into a little bit of that gray shade is going to indicate, but obviously the higher totals would be up to the north and the northwest. There's still a lot of fine tuning to do. The models aren't necessarily agreeing the best as of right now. So we're going to continue to keep it kind of written in pencil as of right now. So that's going to be my homework for you. Continue to check back each and every day about what the latest updates with those rain chances are. It's not the most slam dunk washout forecast that I've ever seen, but it could set us up in a stretch of warmer and more humid air each and every day. And if you have more humidity in the forecast, that can at least lead to some pop-up rain chances each and every day. But I have confidence enough to at least put a thunderstorm icon on both Saturday and Sunday. Not forecasting anything in the way of severe weather, but that's what happens when you get temperatures that are in the mid-80s, well above average, and you continue to pair that up with pretty decent moisture in the atmosphere. Obviously, that's going to enhance the convective activity that we can see with that warm air rising and bringing that surface moisture with it higher up in the sky. So that's something that hopefully, fingers crossed, we are going to have to look forward to as we go into the weekend. It's not the most opportune timing, but it's a rain chance finally, and I know that is something that a lot of you, especially farmers, have been eagerly awaiting. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that we can at least get maybe about an inch of rain out of this next weather maker, and hopefully that sets us up in a warm and humid stretch of weather where we will have some daily rain chances, kind of like we were talking about at the beginning of the month of April. But before we get there, it is still going to continue to be a very quiet work week weather-wise. The only thing you need to know is that you might want some light layering or the light jacket as you walk out the door each of the next couple of days. I think finally as you get into the end of the work week, it will feel a bit more comfortable and pleasant to walk out the door with some numbers in the upper 40s or even into the low 50s. Again, that's not a set value for every location in central Georgia. You kind of know the drill by now. If you tune into the morning show, if you're in Dublin, you're in Eastman, maybe you're up here in Macon, those numbers are always a little bit cooler than say some other areas like Warner Robins, which typically runs a little bit warmer, or say Bleckley County. Cochran was very warm this morning, holding on to numbers near 50 degrees as opposed to those mid and upper 30s we saw in a select few other areas. So there will be quite a temperature spread day by day each and every morning. But as we get into Wednesday, we'll start to try to fine tune maybe that pop-up rain chance. I wouldn't go ahead and maybe get too confident about anything in the way of rain on Wednesday. I still think the humidity remaining pretty low throughout the work week is going to be the reason why we are going to remain dry in our forecast, but we will start to peak as we get into the mid 80s, maybe see some of those numbers soar into the upper 80s, but not forecasting another 90-degree day by any means. And then we could see the numbers being a bit lower as we get an increase in cloud cover, maybe an increase in rain coverage by the time we roll into the end of the weekend. But again, that's something that we still need a lot more details in order to fine-tune at least the coverage of rain. But right now, I am anticipating scattered showers and maybe even a few rumbles of thunder that could be in the cards for both Saturday and Sunday. Just want to know if that scattered nature is going to be more widespread or it's going to be more hit or miss or just general isolated rain chances. So only time will tell, but at least we finally have something to talk about in the way of rain chances and something to at least be optimistic and hopeful for that is at the end of the horizon. So thanks for tuning in to your extended forecast here this Monday. Like we always do, each and every day, 11 a.m., we'll be providing you with the latest updates weather-wise. And now that we have something to look forward to at the end of the weekend in terms of those rain chances and something we need to stay updated on, make sure that you're tuning in each and every morning at 11 a.m. for the latest update on what that weekend forecast is shaping up to be like. And we'll see you, that will do it for Monday. Just trying to find a good way to wrap it up, but we'll see you back here at 11 a.m. once again tomorrow.